moved here to San Diego from Asheville, North Carolina. Starting in 1985, I really got serious about my work. I was surrounded by other artists that moved into the area, one from Liverpool, England, one from Germany, a couple people locally, and we started up a alternative gallery, and also, you know, I was being mentored by the gentleman Kevin Hogan from Liverpool, you know, because at that stage I was just pretty much just making art on my own. It's these kind of funky folk art pieces, and he really brought a certain formalization to my idea of making work with a practice, process, and at that stage, you know, I just found my first studio on Main Street, Asheville. You know, I've been making art forever. You know, I think when I was 15, I saw a documentary on Leonardo da Vinci, and the realization of Da Vinci was he wasn't just a painter, but he was also an inventor. You know, and the prospects of what art could be for me at that point really expanded my notion of art forms and moving in various directions. I realized my voice as an artist at a stage when I was sharing art with people at the factory. And what I was doing, it was just presenting a lot of various ready-made kind of appropriated ideas. And one day someone said, well, they looked at my embossed print, which was a condom and some bolts and washers, and they were like, it looks like a condom and bolts and washers. What is that? It's no big deal, you know? So it made me kind of realize I needed to extend this conversation a little further and maybe narrate something to the viewer, you know, incorporate some kind of story with the viewer, collaborate with the viewer, you know, and go beyond just thinking in terms of making something and assuming they're going to get it. So I started collaborating with people at the factory. My voice is ongoing, you know, what that voice represents is as I get older and I'm experiencing various things within my life, the voice changes. You know, my very first experience of art was when I was in third grade, and we were doing art projects, and I remember if you could, you know, if you did your art project or did whatever you did within the task of the assignment, you're allowed to just do more art the rest of the day. And I remember taking a Sears Roebuck catalog, and I would cut out men's suits, okay? And I would cut out the suit, and I would cut off the head, and I would paste it on paper, and then I would draw in the head. And at that stage, I was pretty much thinking, well, you know, I'm not going to get away with this. It's somewhat like cheating. But my art teacher at the time, was just flabbergasted over it. She thought it was just amazing, you know. And I'm like, really? You know, at that, and that kind of opened me up to the possibilities of cheating and how I could go about outside of just like the traditional way of rendering everything. You know, it was my first appropriated art piece, was using Sears Roebuck, you know, catalog. Yeah, that was my first experience of that, you know, outside of coloring books and things like that, yeah. Yeah, when I was a kid, from the age of 7 to 10, I was in a foster home, and it was like 2 or 3 foster homes, and the one that really was one of the better ones that I live with that experience to this very day was I was living on a farm, was in the center of like 10 acres of forest. I mean, it was thick forest. And I remember, you know, if we went to the church, we had to follow this path, which was almost a mile going to church, to the woods. And if you didn't stay on the path, you were more apt to get lost. And that happened to me at one point, where I didn't know where east or west or north or south was. And next thing I knew, I was spending the night in the woods and being really lost. And to this day, I suffer from certain directional deficit of north or south. To this day, I get really disoriented sometimes. I don't know if that's a product of it, but when that happened, I remember getting up that morning, hearing the river, and I started following the river. I'm thinking, well, the river's going, at least the river's making a straight line. I find myself running in circles. So I was following this river, and I got down far enough, and across the way, it was this guy with one arm guy fishing. And he made his way across the river, picked me up, and I don't know how in the hell he found out where I lived, because I didn't know my address at that stage, and took me home, But yeah, that was a really frightening, really frightening experience in the sense of just not knowing, where you're at, and just a sense of vertigo kicking in. We'd go to town once a month. My foster family, who was the gentleman was a product of World War I. And his wife's 70 years old and him, and they had this old Packard that we'd get in and drive to the Winn-Dixie once a month, and I would sell pop bottles for candy and things like that. It was a great life, though. It was a great life. I remember, which I've done a series of paintings. I've done a few series of paintings of that experience. One of the experiences was a gentleman that was ready to be booted out of the foster home because he was 18. His name was Buddy. He would go out in the forest and take me, and he would have rope and cable, and he'd make these very elaborate swings, and that would he'd go up 50 feet up in the tree and make these swings, and he'd have me test them, and amazing experience there. And I've got a whole series of swing paintings and various other things, that I experienced there. But I had my own, I was in charge of a garden, I was in charge of a pig, chicken, So we had an outhouse at the time, didn't have real plumbing, and it was a real farm life. I worked in the sawmill to make a little money, as a kid. It was a really good experience, though. It was a good experience. It was a real farm life. I worked in the sawmill to make a little money, as a kid. It was a really good experience, though. It was a good experience. Probably at that age, when they started, getting me to help the old man, it was probably around 9. Everybody had to do something on the farm. You couldn't just play all the time. We had our chores, which were fun. I dug being responsible for various things, Till I killed a chicken one time accidentally. I thought for sure I was going to go to hell. Well, because we live in such a consumer culture, that we value things so much, even though, art piece is a thing, but it's the idea of making something that circumvents that idea of the consumer, that you find empowerment through making something. And even more empowerment when someone buys your work that allows you to continue make something. So it is the empowerment, the creative empowerment that you arrive at that's not about consumption. That to me is strength, is power in itself, And it gives you a whole lot of independence psychologically, emotionally from, this plastic culture that we've arrived at within consumerism. What I like to accomplish is more independence, within the art world, which is a very cronyistic kind of system that's attached to academia and the art world itself. I like to find more independence to where I'm making the work I want to make. I'm making a living from that work, and finding that kind of freedom. Ultimately, art is freedom for me. And the more freedom I can have through my art and making the art that I want and selling the art that I'm making, the better. Oh, this liberation. You know, liberation, I'm never sad. It never makes me sad, you know. It's usually, you know, recreation. It's like going into it as a good time. It's almost like a party environment. Well, just waking up, you know, 4 o'clock in the morning and hitting it, you know, and having an idea that's pushing you into it. You know, having that curiosity of what's going to happen on that given day. You know, it's not just a matter of like, you know, wanting to accomplish a painting, but it's the idea of the idea wanting to reveal itself to you. You know, it's that curiosity factor that keeps me going every day. You know, so yeah, there's many layers of processes I've picked up on that I'll revisit based on that certain circumstance that calls for it. Definitely. My hero is probably 3 people: Bernie Sanders, Jimmy Carter, and my mother. Yeah. My mother, you know, even though she drove me mad growing up because she went mad over you know, life circumstances and the rough time she had as a woman raising 5 kids, she embedded a certain value in me that I live with today in terms of not being too materialistic and value being friendships, you know, relationships and art. You know, I remember when people would come over and visit, it was her that would pull out my drawings and share my drawings with the people there, you know, relatives or whoever, friends it might have been, you know, and yeah, she was a very materialistic person, and I always hated her for that until I got older and realized, you know, what a consumer culture we've ended up in. Jimmy Carter, you know, love him. He was a very honest president in the sense of, you know, telling people we got to learn to live with less. And he put, you know, on top of the White House, he put, what is it? I can't even think of it now. Solar panels on the White House. This guy, you know, and outside of the Iran thing, you know, he was just a very believable, straight-up person, comparatively speaking. And then, of course, Bernie Sanders, you know, Bernie's had convictions of what he believes in and within his speeches and his campaign ever since he's been in politics. You know, he's never wavered in terms of those kind of convictions, you know. And I don't know, there's those kind of people that I feel the honesty coming from them, you know, because they've lived that life. Starting off process, okay? You know, the music, respect of the music. And we could say Freddie Mercury, like, there's a Freddie, okay? Right? And the idea of Freddie, I don't know Freddie, but I definitely have evolved within their music, Queen's music. It's influenced my culture, okay? All I have from Freddie is an image, okay? And an image is a codified idea, you know, based on, you know, algorithms and, you know, and pixels and all these things. It's codified, right? And so I take the image, and it's a solid image. It's not moving, right? And then when I establish the image through painting, I go into it with a system of destruction that cracks the image with this analog approach. So it's a balance of something that's codified, digitized, and analog coming together. The codified is the standard, the image. The analog is the action that breaks it open, that opens up the personality of that image into another dimension. Something like that, you know, that's the idea. I want to give dimension to this individual that's more human than just the image you would have. that's a balance of those two worlds. And when those two worlds are balanced, that's when I feel like the painting is successful. It's hard to, develop a new art form. I think when I was going to my Master of Fine Arts, I was actually developing a new art form, which was more of a relational aesthetic in some of my performances. A lot of the people there, the faculty there were like, I don't know what to tell you to do with your work, because you're the first ones ever done anything like that, And so it was hard finding any research on it too. But painting, there's a huge lineage of information on that. People see my painting and they say, well, it's a derivative of Francis Bacon, But going beyond that, it's more derivative of biomorphic surrealism, which is more of a Jean Moreau idea. Was surrealism split out in two different directions. One representational, which is Dali, and then the biomorphic was, Jean Moreau, Andre Masson, those guys. So I'm more of the action, biomorphic, chance-driven kind of artist, which, through chance, you'll always come up with different possibilities.